The great chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as the emergency broadcast began to play. 10,000 years of peace had made the council members soft, unprepared for what they were about to witness. The holographic display flickered to life, showing scenes that would haunt them for cycles to come. Velaran's cities burned. The footage was shaky, recorded by someone running for their lives. Massive organic shapes moved through the smoke, their bodies covered in chitinous armor that gleamed wet and black. The Kethrak swarm had returned from the dark spaces between galaxies, and they were hungry. Council Speaker Mordain, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns, watched the display with growing horror. His voice, usually calm and measured, cracked as he spoke. "This cannot be happening. The Kethraks were eliminated 3,000 cycles ago. The historical records confirmed their extinction." "The records were wrong," said Ambassador Tyrell, the elderly Velaran who had brought the emergency session together. His scaled hands trembled as he manipulated the controls, showing more footage. They merely retreated, regrouped, and now they have returned stronger than before. The display showed a Kethrak's warrior up close. It stood nearly 3 meters tall with 6 limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Its head was eyeless, covered instead with sensory organs that pulsed with bioluminescence. Acid dripped from its mandibles, burning holes in the ground where it walked. In the footage, it grabbed a fleeing Velaran civilian, and the recording cut off abruptly. A wave of distressed sounds rippled through the council chamber. The Aquarian representative, floating in his gravity-suspended water sphere, turned a pale shade of blue that indicated extreme fear. The insectoid Chiric delegate's antennae drooped. The plant-based Sylvani swayed as if hit by a strong wind. "What are our military options?" Mordain asked, though he already knew the answer. Everyone in the chamber knew. Defense Coordinator Pelax, a being composed of pure energy contained within a magnetic field, dimmed noticeably. "We have no military options, Council Speaker. The Galactic Peace Accord of Cycle 7243 dissolved all standing military forces. Our security services are trained for civil disputes, not warfare. They carry stun weapons designed for crowd control, not combat." "The Velaran Home Defense Fleet?" someone asked hopefully. Tyrell's expression answered before his words did. "Destroyed. 17 ships, gone in the first hour of the attack. The Kethraks adapted to our weapons before we could even establish effective firing patterns. They learn, they evolve, and they do it faster than we can respond." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from 100 worlds shouted over each other, their translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping languages. Some demanded immediate evacuation of threatened sectors. Others proposed diplomatic missions to the Kethraks, still clinging to the belief that all conflicts could be resolved through dialogue. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the reality facing them. Mordain raised his crystalline hands, and the chamber's acoustic dampeners activated, forcing silence. "Order, we must have order. Pelax, what forces can we mobilize?" "The Chiric have 300 ceremonial guard ships. The Aquarians maintain 50 research vessels with defensive capabilities. The Mining Guild has perhaps 200 ore haulers that could be weaponized, though it would take weeks. Combined, we might assemble a fleet of 600 vessels." Pelax paused, his energy field flickering with what might have been embarrassment. "The Kethraks fleet currently attacking Velaran space numbers in the thousands, and they are purpose-built for war." The silence that followed was suffocating. 10,000 years of peace had seemed like such an achievement. The Council had prided itself on evolving beyond violence, on solving problems through reason and cooperation. Now that philosophy felt like a child's fantasy, crushed beneath the reality of biological horrors that cared nothing for diplomacy. Tyrell stood slowly, his old bones creaking. "There may be one option, though it terrifies me to even suggest it." All eyes turned to him. He pulled out a data crystal that looked ancient, its surface marked with warning symbols in a dozen languages. 40 cycles ago, I was a xenoarchaeologist. I spent my life studying the lesser archives, the files deemed too dangerous for general access. I found something. A species the Council encountered 200 cycles ago and immediately quarantined. He inserted the crystal into the display system. The hologram changed, showing a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. They called their planet Earth, and themselves humans. The initial images seemed unremarkable. Bipedal beings, bilateral symmetry, relatively standard biochemistry. But then Tyrrell began sharing the classification data, and the chamber's atmosphere shifted. Homeworld gravity, 1.3 times standard. Atmospheric oxygen, 30% higher than optimal. Surface temperature variation, -40 to +50 degrees. Predator saturation, Class 7. Disease exposure, Class 9. Toxic plant species, Class 6. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Overall planetary hazard rating, Class 12 Death World. Murmurs of disbelief spread through the chamber. Most Council species came from Class 2 or 3 worlds, with carefully balanced ecosystems and minimal environmental dangers. A Class 12 rating meant a planet that actively tried to kill its inhabitants. The humans evolved in an environment of constant threat, Tyrrell continued. They compete with apex predators, survive diseases that would devastate our populations, and endure environmental extremes that would require our best protective equipment. Their bone density is 3 times that of the average Council species. Their muscle tissue can exert force that would crush our skulls, and their capacity for violence. He showed combat footage from humanity's first contact with a Council exploration vessel. The humans hadn't attacked, but they had demonstrated their military capabilities as a warning. Ships that moved with impossible agility, weapons that delivered kinetic force, explosive power, and directed energy with equal efficiency, soldiers in powered armor who trained constantly for combat scenarios. The first contact team classified them as extremely dangerous and recommended immediate quarantine, Tyrrell said. The humans agreed to isolation, retreating to their solar system. We established a boundary and forbade any contact. For 200 cycles, we have pretended they do not exist. And you propose we contact them now? Mordain asked, his crystalline structure vibrating with agitation. You want to invite Deathworlders into Council space? Beings evolved for violence? I propose we send them the same distress signal we would send to any Council member, Tyrrell replied. And let them choose. Because right now, the only thing standing between the Kethrax and complete galactic domination is time, and we are running out of it. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some argued that bringing humans into the equation would simply replace one nightmare with another. Others pointed out that without help, there would be no Council left to protect. Representatives sent urgent communications to their homeworlds, seeking guidance from governments that had never faced a crisis like this. Finally, as reports came in of another 3 Valaran colonies going dark, the Council voted. The measure passed by a narrow margin. 347 votes in favor, 289 against. 4 abstentions. They would send a message to Earth. A simple distress call containing footage of the Kethrax attacks, coordinates of the threatened sectors, and a plea for assistance. No demands, no commands. Just a request from a desperate civilization to beings they had once deemed too dangerous to acknowledge. As Tyrrell prepared the transmission, Mordain approached him privately.
Do you truly believe they will help us?
After we exiled them? The old Velaran looked at the footage of his burning homeworld one more time. I do not know, but I know what the Kethrax will do if no one stops them. Perhaps the humans will refuse. Perhaps they will demand concessions we cannot afford. Or perhaps we will learn that the monsters we feared were exactly what we needed all along. The transmission was sent at maximum power, racing across the stars toward a small yellow sun and the death world that orbited it. All the Council could do now was wait and hope that humanity would answer the call of strangers who had once turned them away. The message reached Earth Defense Command at 0347 hours Geneva Standard Time. Admiral Sarah, Chen was 3 hours into her sleep cycle when the emergency alert pulled her from dreams of her childhood home in Beijing. She arrived at the command center still fastening her uniform, her short gray hair uncombed but her eyes sharp and alert. Talk to me, she said, sliding into her command chair. Commander James Walsh brought up the display. We received this transmission 17 minutes ago. It's from the Galactic Council, the same bastards who quarantined us 2 centuries ago. The footage played on the main screen. Chen watched in silence as alien cities burned, as civilians fled from creatures that looked like nightmares given form. She had seen war before, had commanded vessels in the border conflicts and the Mars Rebellion, but this was something else. This was extermination. The Kethrax swarm, she said quietly, reading the attached data files. I know this name. Ancient records from the Council's first contact package mentioned them. Supposedly extinct? Apparently not, Walsh replied. Intelligence analysis suggests the Council has no military capability worth mentioning. Their distress call is genuine. They're being slaughtered. Chen leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled under her chin. Assemble the Joint Chiefs. Wake up the Secretary General. And get me every piece of intelligence we have on Council military capabilities for the past 200 years. I want to know exactly how bad their situation is. The command center exploded into activity. Officers moved between stations. Secure channels opened to military installations across Earth and her colonies. And priority alerts went out to the United Earth Assembly. Within an hour, every major government on the planet knew that the galaxy which had rejected them was now begging for help. The debate that erupted across Earth made the Council's arguments look calm by comparison. News networks ran continuous coverage, showing the Cuthrax footage alongside historical records of humanity's quarantine. Public opinion split sharply down the middle. They called us savages, said Representative Jackson from the North American Union during an emergency assembly session. They deemed us too violent, too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. They locked us in our own star system like criminals. And now, when they face real danger, suddenly we're good enough to call. They're dying, countered Ambassador Liu from the Asian Coalition. Whatever grievances we hold, whatever insults we've endured, there are billions of innocent civilians being killed. Children, families, entire civilizations facing extinction. How can we call ourselves civilized if we turn away from that? The arguments raged for hours. Some pointed out that 200 years of isolation had allowed humanity to develop technologies the Council couldn't match. Others worried that helping would drain Earth's resources and leave humanity vulnerable. A few extremists suggested letting the Council fall and then claiming their territory. But the footage kept playing. The images of aliens fleeing, dying, crying out in languages humanity didn't speak, but whose meaning was universal. Terror looked the same across every species. Admiral Chen found herself standing before the assembly, called to provide a military assessment. She stood at the podium, aware that her words might determine the fate of billions across the galaxy. Members of the assembly, she began, her voice carrying the weight of 40 years of military service. I've reviewed the tactical situation. The Kethrax represent an existential threat, not just to the Council, but potentially to humanity. If they consume the Council's territory, they will have the resources of 1,000 worlds. They will grow stronger, and eventually they will find Earth. She paused, letting that sink in. From a purely strategic standpoint, it is in our interest to stop them now, while they're engaged with Council forces, rather than wait until they arrive at our doorstep with the strength of an entire galaxy behind them. And from a moral standpoint? Someone asked from the back. Chen's expression softened slightly. 200 years ago, the Council judged us by our capacity for violence. They saw our weapons, our warriors, our history of conflict, and they were afraid. They weren't entirely wrong to be afraid. We are dangerous. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we survived by becoming the most effective predators our planet had ever seen. She advanced the display, showing images of human history, ancient warriors with bronze swords, medieval knights in armor, World War II soldiers storming beaches, modern Marines in powered combat suits, a species that had never stopped preparing for war. But they missed something crucial, Chen continued. They saw what we could do in war and never asked why we fought. We don't fight because we're cruel. We fight because we protect. Every human soldier carries a picture, a memory, a reason. Family back home. Friends in the next foxhole. Strangers who need defending. We became warriors not because we love violence, but because we love what violence can protect. She pulled up the Valaran footage again, focusing on a scene of a parent shielding their child from a Kethrax warrior. Look at that. Tell me that's not a human parent doing exactly what we would do. Tell me those aren't lives worth fighting for. The assembly hall was silent. Chen pressed on. The Council was wrong about us. They judged our capacity for violence without understanding our capacity for compassion. They saw killers and never looked deep enough to see protectors. We have a chance now to show them who we really are. Not the monsters they feared, but the guardians they need. She straightened, her admiral's stars catching the light. I recommend we mobilize the 1st through 5th Expeditionary Armadas. Approximately 400 vessels, including carriers, battlecruisers, destroyers, and support ships. We can reach Valaran space in 6 days if we push the jump drives. We can make a difference. We can save lives. And we can do it because it's the right thing to do, not because we want their approval. And if they fear us afterward? Representative Jackson asked. If we save them and they still see us as monsters? Chen smiled grimly. Then we'll go home knowing we're the kind of monsters who save people. I can live with that. Can you live with doing nothing? The vote was called. The hall's voting system lit up with choices. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for abstention. Chen watched the tally climb, her heart pounding despite her calm exterior. Humanity was making a choice that would define them for generations. Green, 412. Red, 287. Yellow, 51. The measure passed. Earth would answer the call. The military mobilization that followed was the largest in human history. Shipyards that had been building colony vessels and mining ships switched to military production. Reservists were called up from across Earth and her colonies. Marines who had been training for theoretical conflicts suddenly had a very real war ahead of them. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the EDF Indomitable, a Prometheus-class battle carrier that represented the peak of human military engineering. Around her, 400 vessels prepared for jump to Valaran space. Communications, she ordered. Prepare a transmission to the Galactic Council. Audio and text maximum power. Ready, Admiral. Chen took a breath thinking about how to address beings who had rejected humanity 2 centuries ago. She decided on simple honesty. Galactic Council, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. We're coming, hold on. Earth out. She turned to her navigation officer. Plot the jump. All ships are to stay in formation. We're going in together. Jump plotted and confirmed, Admiral. All ships report ready. Then let's go introduce ourselves properly, Chen said. All ships execute jump in 3, 2, 1, mark. The Indomitable's jump drive engaged, tearing a hole in space-time. One by one, 400 human warships followed her through, racing toward a war against nightmares from between the galaxies. On Earth, billions watched the fleet disappear from their solar system, hoping they had made the right choice. In Council space, sensors detected the massive jump signatures and confusion spread. The humans were coming, but no one knew if they were salvation or simply a different kind of doom. And in the dark between stars, the Kethrak swarm continued their feast, unaware that they were about to face prey that fought back. The human fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of Velaran territory like vengeful gods stepping into reality. 400 warships, their hulls bearing the scars of 2 centuries of isolated development, arranged themselves in perfect formation. Their sensor arrays swept the system, cataloging threats, identifying targets, and painting a picture of devastation. Tyrell stood on the bridge of the Council diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice, watching the human fleet with a mixture of awe and terror. He had read the files, seen the projections, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. The smallest human destroyer was twice the size of the largest Council research vessel. Their flagship, the Indomitable, was a floating fortress that made his ship look like a child's toy. They're hailing us, the communications officer said, her voice trembling. Audio only. They're asking for permission to approach. Grant it, Tyrell said, surprised at how steady his own voice sounded. And prepare a shuttle. If we're going to do this, we do it properly, face to face. The journey to the Indomitable took 30 minutes. Tyrell used the time to observe the human fleet more closely. Every ship bristled with weapons. Railguns that could accelerate projectiles to relativistic speeds. Missile pods that housed enough nuclear warheads to crack a moon. Energy weapons that glowed with barely contained power. These were not exploration vessels retrofitted for war. These were purpose-built instruments of destruction. The shuttle bay of the Indomitable was large enough to hold 3 of Tyrell's diplomatic ships. As the shuttle landed, he saw rows of human fighters lined up like sleeping predators, and Marines in powered armor standing at attention. The Valaran delegation of 6 felt very small as they descended the shuttle ramp. Admiral Chen waited for them at the base, her uniform crisp despite the 6-day journey at maximum speed. She stood at standard human height, nearly 2 meters tall, but what struck Tyrell most was her presence. This was a being who had commanded forces in real combat, who had made life and death decisions and lived with the consequences. Ambassador Tyrell, Chen said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Welcome aboard. Tyrell reached out carefully. His scaled hand was swallowed by Chen's grip. He felt the strength there, carefully controlled. She could have crushed his bones without effort, but her touch was gentle, respectful. "Thank you for coming, Admiral," he said. "I know the circumstances of our previous relationship. We're not ideal." Chen smiled slightly. "You locked us in our solar system and told us to stay away from civilized space. Yeah, not ideal is one way to put it, but we're not here to settle old grudges. You've got a Kathrax problem, and apparently we're the galaxy's pest control." She led them through the ship, and Tiral's delegation tried not to stare at everything. The corridors were wider than necessary, built to accommodate Marines in full combat armor moving at a run. The gravity was crushing by Council standards, though the humans moved through it with ease. Even the air felt different, thicker and richer in oxygen, making Tiral slightly dizzy. They passed groups of human soldiers, and Tiral noticed details that chilled him. These weren't ceremonial guards or police officers. These were warriors. They moved with predatory grace, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Their bodies showed the results of Earth's harsh gravity and competitive evolution. Dense muscle, quick reflexes, and an alertness that spoke of species-wide paranoia honed over millions of years. The briefing room was functional, with none of the artistic touches that decorated council vessels. A large display dominated one wall, showing tactical data on the Kathrax advance. Chen gestured for the delegation to sit, though the chairs were uncomfortably large for most of them. "Let's get down to business," Chen said. "We've been analyzing the Kathrax based on your data and our own sensor readings. They're biological weapons optimized for overwhelming less aggressive species. Fast reproduction, rapid adaptation, and pack hunting tactics. Nasty but not insurmountable." She brought up a holographic display of a Kathrax warrior. "Their armor is thick but has weak points at the joints. Their acid is dangerous but can be neutralized with basic chemical compounds. They rely on close combat because they haven't developed ranged weapons beyond organic projectiles. In human terms, they're like Earth's Paleolithic predators. Scary if you're unarmed, but we stopped being unarmed about 50,000 years ago." Tiral felt a chill at the casual way she discussed combat against creatures that had terrorized the galaxy. "What are your strategic plans, Admiral?" Chen pulled up a star map showing the Kathrax advance. Red markers indicated destroyed colonies, yellow showed systems under attack, and blue represented the human fleet's planned route. "We're going to hit them here, at the Veleron manufacturing colony of Talmar. It's under siege but not fully overrun. We'll secure orbit, eliminate Kathrax forces, and establish it as a forward operating base. Then we'll systematically clear occupied systems, working our way toward their main fleet concentration." "How many casualties do you anticipate?" asked Velmoth, the Council's xenobiologist, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ours or theirs?" Chen asked. "Yours. Military projections suggest we'll lose about 15 to 20% of our forces in a protracted campaign. Maybe 8,000 personnel killed, another 12,000 wounded. Those are acceptable numbers for a war of this scale." The Council delegation sat in horrified silence. Chen had just discussed human deaths with the same tone someone might use to discuss supply logistics. Velmoth's skin had gone pale. "Acceptable? You consider thousands of deaths acceptable?" Chen's expression hardened. "In war? Yes, I wish it wasn't true. I wish we could save everyone. But the Kathrax aren't going to stop because we ask nicely. And every day we delay means more of your people die. So yes, I accept that some of my people will die to save millions of yours. That's what soldiers do." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. A human officer appeared on the display. "Admiral, Kathrax patrol group detected. 6 bioships heading for the outer colonies. ETA to populated zones, 90 minutes. Chen stood immediately. "Battle stations." "Third Fleet, you're with me. 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th maintain position and continue planning operations. Ambassador Tiral, you and your people should return to your ship." "I want to observe," Tiral said, surprising himself. "If you'll allow it." Chen studied him for a moment. "You sure? This isn't going to be pretty. I need to see, to understand." "All right. Velmoth, take the ambassador to the observation deck. Give him a good view." Everyone else returned to Harmony's voice immediately. The observation deck was a reinforced blister on the Indomitable's hull, offering a panoramic view of space. Tiral and Velmoth watched as the human fleet arranged itself. The ships moved with startling agility for their size, taking up positions that Tiral's military training recognized as classic ambush formation. "Contact in 3 minutes." Chen's voice came through the speakers. "Weapons free on my mark." Remember your training. No heroes, no showboating. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we send them back to the hell they came from. The Kithrax bioships emerged from behind a dead moon, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence. They were massive, each one the size of a council cruiser, covered in chitinous armor and studded with organic weapon ports. Tyrell had seen these ships destroy entire defense fleets. "Mark," Chen said simply. The human fleet opened fire, and Tyrell learned what real war looked like. Railgun rounds crossed the distance at a significant fraction of light speed, punching through Kithrax armor like paper. Nuclear-tipped missiles created miniature suns, burning away entire sections of bioship hull. Energy weapons carved glowing lines across the void, superheating alien flesh and boiling internal fluids. The Kithrax tried to respond, launching acid projectiles and attempting to close to boarding range, but the humans didn't let them. They maintained distance, using their superior speed and firepower to control the engagement. When one Kithrax ship managed to accelerate toward a human destroyer, a cloud of point defense fire shredded it before it got within a kilometer. The battle lasted 7 minutes. 6 Kithrax ships destroyed, 0 human casualties. Tyrell stood in stunned silence as the human fleet began recovery operations, collecting sensor data and analyzing wreckage. On the display, he could see Marines preparing boarding pods to investigate the largest intact Kithrax corpse. "They're going inside?" Velmoth asked, horrified. "Those ships are still full of warrior drones. They want samples," Chen's voice answered. She had apparently been listening, "and my Marines have fought in worse environments than a dead Kithrax ship. They'll be fine." And they were. Tyrell watched on the tactical display as human soldiers in sealed armor entered the bioship, efficiently eliminating the surviving Kithrax drones with coordinated fire. They moved through the organic corridors like they had done this 1,000 times, collecting samples and mapping the internal structure. When it was over, Tyrell turned to Velmoth. "We asked for warriors," he said quietly, "and they sent us demons in human skin." "No," Velmoth replied, still watching the display showing human medics treating wounded Kithrax samples with careful professionalism. "They're not demons. They're what we would have become if our worlds had been cruel enough." The liberation of Talmar took 3 days of brutal fighting. The Kithrax had converted the manufacturing colony into a breeding ground, filling the underground facilities with their organic infrastructure. Human Marines fought through corridors slick with alien biomatter, clearing room by room while orbital bombardment destroyed the surface hive structures. Dr. Velmoth watched from the Indomitable's medical bay as wounded humans returned from the surface. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about biology. A Marine came in with a broken arm, the bone visible through torn armor and flesh. The medic reset the bone, applied a regeneration stimulant, and the Marine was back in rotation within 6 hours. Another soldier arrived with acid burns across her torso that should have been fatal. The medical team treated her with casual efficiency, and she survived. "How?" Velmoth asked the chief medical officer, Dr. Marcus Webb, a gruff man with cybernetic eyes and gray in his beard. "How do they survive injuries that would kill any council species?" Webb glanced up from his work. "Evolution, Doc. Earth's a mean place. Our bodies learn to take a beating and keep going. High bone density, redundant systems, powerful immune response, and a pain tolerance that lets us function through injuries that would shock other species into unconsciousness. We're not tougher because we're special. We're tougher because anything less would have died on Earth." He gestured to a Marine on a nearby bed, recovering from what the chart listed as multiple lacerations, internal bleeding, and mild radiation exposure. The soldier was conscious, reading something on a datapad. "That's Corporal Jenkins. 3 days ago, she was in hand-to-hand combat with Kithrax warriors when her position got hit by friendly artillery. Shrapnel everywhere, building collapsed on her squad. She dug herself out, carried 2 wounded teammates to safety, then went back into the fight. You want to know the secret of humanity? It's people like Jenkins." Velmoth began documenting everything he observed. The reports he sent back to the council grew longer each day, filled with observations that sounded like fiction, but were verified by every sensor. Humans fighting in vacuum after hull breaches. Humans adapting to toxic atmospheres with simple respirators. Humans establishing beachheads on Kithrax-occupied worlds and holding them against waves of attackers. The stories spread through the refugee populations like wildfire. The council species huddled in evacuation camps and emergency shelters whispered about the humans in tones of awe and terror. They spoke of Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, who led her squad through a Keythrax hive ship for 18 hours without rest. Of Sergeant Jackson Chen, who held a choke point alone against 30 Keythrax warriors while his team evacuated civilians. Of Commander Sarah Kim, whose fighter squadron flew missions in conditions that would have grounded any Council pilot. But the humans also showed unexpected gentleness. Tyrell watched Admiral Chen spend hours coordinating with Velaran authorities to evacuate civilians before military strikes. He saw human Marines sharing their rations with refugee children, learning basic phrases in alien languages to comfort the scared and displaced. The same soldiers who fought with savage efficiency also worked tirelessly to repair damaged infrastructure and distribute aid. Contradiction confused the Council observers until Commander Walsh explained it during a late-night conversation. We're not violent because we enjoy it. We're violent because we're good at protecting what we care about. Every human soldier knows what they're fighting for: home, family, the right of people to live without fear. The Keythrax are just the current threat. We fought human tyrants, alien invaders, and our own worst impulses. We'll fight whatever we have to. The campaign ground forward system by system. The human fleet adopted a methodical approach, clearing Keythrax presence completely before moving on. They established supply lines, built forward bases, and created a network of defensive positions that prevented the Keythrax from retaking conquered territory. After 6 weeks of fighting, Velmoth published his comprehensive report on human military capabilities. The document became required reading for every Council member, and several sections were quoted so often they became famous throughout civilized space. His analysis of human resilience noted, humans possess a biological redundancy that borders on excessive. Their cardiovascular system can function with significant damage. Their skeletal structure can bear loads that would crush Council species. Their immune system treats infections that would be fatal to us as minor inconveniences. Earth subjected humanity to every possible biological threat, and they evolved to survive all of them. His section on human tactics observed, they fight as if every battle is personal. Council military theory emphasizes preservation of forces and minimal engagement. Human doctrine accepts casualties as inevitable and focuses on mission completion. They will sacrifice tactical advantages for strategic victories. They will endure losses that would force our surrender and press the attack harder. This is not cruelty. This is mathematics. They calculate that more lives are saved by ending the war quickly than by prolonging it cautiously. But it was his conclusion that struck deepest. We feared humans because they are efficient killers. We should have feared them because they are efficient at everything. They do not merely fight well. They adapt, improvise, and overcome. They turn every setback into a lesson and every victory into a platform for the next advance. The Keythrax have defeated every force the Council could muster, because they adapt faster than we can respond. The humans adapt faster than the Keythrax. That may be the difference that saves us all. The turning point came at the Battle of Valara Prime, the homeworld itself. The Keythrax had established their largest hive there, converting half the planet into breeding grounds. Council projections suggested it would take months to reclaim, with millions of civilian casualties. Admiral Chen had other ideas. She assembled the entire human fleet and every available Council ship, creating an armada of nearly 600 vessels. The battle plan was ambitious to the point of insanity. A direct assault on the hive, followed by planetary landing and systematic extermination of Keythrax forces. They'll adapt to our tactics, argued Council Fleet Coordinator Pelax during the planning session. They always do. We'll lose half our ships before we establish orbital control. Then we adapt faster, Chen replied. We're going to hit them with everything at once. Multiple attack vectors, randomized weapon frequencies, and overlapping fields of fire. We're not going to give them time to adapt. It's called shock and awe, and Earth perfected it about 400 years ago. The assault began with a missile barrage that turned the night side of Valara Prime into artificial daylight. Thousands of warheads saturated Keythrax orbital defenses, overwhelming their ability to intercept. The human fleet followed, pushing through the expanding cloud of debris and vaporized bioships. Tyrell watched from the Indomitable as the battle unfolded. It was chaos given form. Ships maneuvered at speeds that seemed impossible for their mass. Weapon fire turned space into a web of destructive energy. Keythrax bioships tried to adapt, shifting their armor composition and attack patterns. But the humans changed tactics faster. never allowing the Kithrax to establish a response pattern. The orbital battle lasted 9 hours. When it ended, the Kithrax orbital presence was eliminated and the human fleet controlled the high ground. Ground operations began immediately, with human marines making combat drops directly into Kithrax-controlled zones. It was during these ground operations that the Kithrax deployed their ultimate weapon, biospores designed to cause catastrophic hemorrhaging in any carbon-based lifeform. The compound was based on a disease that had wiped out 3 council species in the ancient past. The Kithrax released it in the atmosphere, confident it would devastate human forces. Dr. Webb analyzed samples within 2 hours. His report was brief. It's basically a supercharged hemorrhagic fever, similar to several Earth diseases including Ebola, Marburg, and Crimean Congo fever. Nasty, but our immune systems have evolved to fight these types of pathogens. Recommend standard quarantine procedures for infected personnel. Continue operations. The Kithrax bioweapon that should have ended the battle killed fewer than 200 humans. The survivors developed antibodies within days. The Marines kept fighting, and the Kithrax learned that their ultimate biological weapon was merely an inconvenience to a species from a death world. Valara Prime was liberated after 16 days of continuous combat. Human casualties were high, nearly 3,000 dead and twice that wounded, but the planet was saved. Tyrell stood in the ruins of his people's capital city, watching human engineers work alongside Valaran survivors to restore basic services. A young human private, barely 20 Earth years old, was helping clear rubble from a collapsed school. She worked with mechanical efficiency, her powered armor allowing her to lift debris that would require council machinery. When she uncovered a Valaran child's toy, she stopped, carefully cleaned it, and set it aside for when the survivors returned. Tyrell approached her. "Why do you fight?" he asked in English, which he had been learning. The private looked at him, sweat streaking her face despite the armor's climate control. The chase lasted 3 days. The Kithrax Queen Mind fled toward the edge of charted space, her massive hive ship trailing smaller vessels like a queen bee surrounded by workers. The human fleet pursued relentlessly, pushing their jump drives beyond recommended safety limits. Admiral Chen had made her decision clear. The Kithrax would not escape to rebuild. They caught up to the Kithrax in an uncharted system orbiting a dying red giant. The Queen Mind had chosen her final battleground carefully. The system was a graveyard of shattered planets, their rocky remains creating a maze of debris fields and radiation zones that would challenge any attacker. "Tactical assessment," Chen ordered, studying the display on the ear. "Indomitable's bridge. The hive ship has anchored, itself to the largest planetoid fragment," reported Commander Walsh. "They've deployed defensive positions throughout the debris field. Sensors indicate approximately 2,000 Kithrax bioships, plus untold numbers of warrior drones inside the hive itself. They're not running anymore, Admiral. They're making a stand," Chen nodded slowly. "Good. Running battles are expensive. Better to end it here." She opened fleet-wide communications. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The Kithrax Queen Mind is in that hive ship. We destroy her, we end this war, but it's going to be the hardest fight we've faced. They're cornered, desperate, and have nothing to lose. Stay sharp, watch your spacing, and remember your training. Let's finish this." The battle began with long-range bombardment. Human ships unleashed everything they had, turning the space around the hive ship into a storm of fire and radiation. Nuclear warheads detonated in carefully coordinated patterns, creating overlapping kill zones. Railguns fired streams of tungsten penetrators that punched through bioship armor. Energy weapons carved glowing furrows across the hive's surface. The Kithrax responded with savage determination. Bioships launched themselves at the human fleet in suicide runs, detonating their organic explosives against shields and armor. Acid projectiles crossed the void, eating through hull plating and forcing damage control teams into constant action. The Queen Mind herself fired massive organic cannons from deep within the hive, weapons that could crack a destroyer in half with a single hit. Tyrell watched from the Indomitable's observation deck as ships on both sides died. A human cruiser took a direct hit from one of the hive's main weapons, her reactor going critical, and taking 3 Kithrax bioships with her in the explosion. A destroyer squadron pushed too deep into the debris field and was swarmed by hundreds of smaller Kithrax vessels, their distress calls cutting off one by one. "We're taking heavy losses," Velmoth said, his medical training making him acutely aware of each casualty report. 15 ships destroyed, another 30 damaged. That's nearly 4,000 casualties. And they've lost over half their fleet, Tyrrell replied, watching the tactical display. The humans are grinding them down. It's brutal, but it's working. After 6 hours of combat, Admiral Chen made the call everyone had been waiting for. All ships, this is Chen. We've suppressed their outer defenses. Marine assault teams, you're cleared for boarding operations. I want that hive ship neutralized from the inside. Move out. 200 assault shuttles launched from the human fleet, each carrying a squad of Marines in full combat armor. They wove through the debris field, point defense systems intercepting Keithrak's fire as they closed on the massive hive ship. Some didn't make it, shot down by the hive's defensive weapons or overwhelmed by bioship interceptors. But most did, punching through the organic hull and deploying their human cargo into the nightmare within. Commander Maria Rodriguez led Alpha Company through a breach near what scanners suggested was a major arterial passage. The interior of the hive was humid and dark, lit only by bioluminescent growths that pulsed with sickly light. The walls were alive, covered in organic conduits that throbbed with the hive's circulation. The air was thick with spores and organic compounds that would have killed most council species in minutes. The humans simply adjusted their respirators and pushed deeper. Contact front, someone called out, and the passage ahead erupted with Keithrak's warriors. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, charging through the organic corridors with murder in their eyeless faces. Rodriguez's Marines opened fire with practiced precision. Plasma rifles turned Keithrak's warriors into burning corpses. Grenades filled the passage with fragmentation and fire. When the Keithraks closed to melee range, the Marines met them with monomolecular blades and powered gauntlets, fighting in the cramped spaces with brutal efficiency. The battle raged through the hive's arterial passages, each meter gained paid for in blood and sacrifice. Marines died, dragged down by overwhelming numbers or caught by lucky strikes from Keithrak's claws. But for every human that fell, a dozen Keithraks died and the advance continued. Rodriguez led her company deeper, following sensor readings toward the Queen Mine's chamber. The resistance intensified the closer they got. The Keithraks threw everything at them. Warrior drones bred for close combat, acid sprayers that filled corridors with corrosive mist, even suicide bombers that detonated themselves in desperate attempts to stop the advance. "This is Alpha Company," Rodriguez reported between firefights. "We're 50 meters from the Queen Mine's chamber. Resistance is intense. Request additional support." "Negative, Alpha," came Admiral Chen's voice. "All other companies are pinned down. You're the tip of the spear. Finish it." Rodriguez checked her ammunition, her armor's power levels, and the haggard faces of her surviving Marines. Out of the 40 soldiers who had started this push, she had 18 left. "All right, people. One more push. For Earth, for the Council, for every person the Keithraks have killed. Let's end this." They blew through the final barrier with shaped charges, flooding into the Queen Mine's chamber with weapons blazing. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of organic architecture built around the massive form of the Queen Mind herself. She was enormous, easily 30 meters long, her body a grotesque fusion of intelligence and breeding capability. Smaller Keithraks swarmed around her, protecting their mother with fanatical determination. The battle that followed was chaos. Rodriguez's Marines established a firing line, pouring concentrated fire into the Queen Mind while fighting off her defenders. The Queen Mind shrieked, a sound that bypassed hearing and resonated directly in the mind, full of rage and hate and the promise of extinction for all who opposed her. She tried to communicate then, her psychic voice crashing through the Marines' mental barriers. Images flooded their minds. Keithrak's domination across galaxies, humans enslaved and broken, Earth consumed and converted to another hive. Offers of alliance, threats of extinction, prophecies of doom if they continued. "I don't negotiate with genocidal monsters," Rodriguez said, launching a micro-missile directly at the Queen Mine's central nervous cluster. The missile detonated with thermobaric fury, creating a pressure wave that consumed the oxygen in the chamber and crushed organic structures with overpressure. The Queen Mine's shriek cut off abruptly. Her massive body spasmed once, twice, then went still. Throughout the hive ship, Keithrak's warriors froze mid-attack. Without the Queen Mine's coordination, the swarm collapsed into individual organisms with no higher purpose. Some fled, some fought on mindlessly, some simply stopped moving. their biological programming unable to function without guidance. Alpha Company to Indomitable, Rodriguez called, her voice hoarse from breathing recycled air for hours. Queen Mind is eliminated. I repeat, Queen Mind is down. The cheering that erupted across the human fleet could be heard even through the radio static. Ship crews who had been fighting for days allowed themselves a moment of celebration. Marines still clearing the hive ship embraced each other, laughing and crying with relief and exhaustion. Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile before returning to the immediate concerns. All ships continue sweeps. I want every Kethrax organism in this system eliminated. No survivors, no escapees. We end this here. The cleanup operations took another 2 days. Human ships systematically destroyed every Kethrax bioship, tracked down fleeing warriors, and scoured the hive ship from end to end. When it was done, when the last Kethrax was confirmed dead, Chen ordered the hive ship destroyed. Nuclear warheads reduced the massive organic construct to expanding clouds of vaporized biomatter. The journey back to Council space was somber. The human fleet had won, but the cost had been severe. 42 ships destroyed, nearly 6,000 dead, and twice that number wounded. Every vessel carried the names of the fallen, and memorial services were held throughout the fleet. When they arrived at Valara Prime, a massive delegation waited for them. The entire Galactic Council had assembled, along with representatives from every major species. Billions watched on broadcasts across Council space as Admiral Chen's shuttle landed in the reconstructed capital city. The Council chamber had been rebuilt quickly, a symbol of recovery and resilience. Tiral stood with the other Council members as Admiral Chen entered, still wearing her combat-stained uniform, too tired to care about ceremony. Speaker Mordaine's crystalline form flickered with complex emotions. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council and the trillions of beings you have saved, we offer our deepest gratitude. Your actions have